Hello and welcome back to the Aerobic Edge podcast. I'm Joost, your coach over at Base Buddies, and in today's episode we're going to interview a very special guest, my coach John Starrett. John Starrett helps beginners through Elite to unlock their running potential. He even coached Olympians. And in this episode we're going to interview him to see how he helps beginners to elites to achieve sub-3 marathons or even faster. So let's dive in and enjoy my conversation with John. Hi John, welcome to the Aerobic Edge podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Juice. Pleasure.
For the runners out there that doesn't know you yet, can you tell me something about yourself and how you became a running coach?
Yeah, well, I'm 61 years of age. I've been run coaching for over 40 years. I started in my early 20s, just kind of helping people, then working in the club system, at trackside and things like that. And then in 2017, I started coaching online. And since then now, I've got I suppose, a stable, as we call it, a global stable from people all around the world, from beginners to Olympians. Um, so, and now it's kind of the sort of thing where I'm mentoring other coaches as well. So, and I suppose that's the background. Now, I suppose in terms of facts and figures, I've coached nearly 900 people to sub 3 hour marathons since 2017, over 250 to sub 230. I've had athletes, male and female, in the past three US Olympic marathon trials. And I suppose most recently in the Japan Olympics, I had an athlete from Ireland competing in the marathon.
Oh, great. Who was that in the Japan Olympics?
Aoife Cook. So she started with me, I think, in December 2019. Her marathon PB was 2:46 or 2:47. In 10 months, we got it down to 2:32. And then she was training for the Vienna Marathon, but COVID hit, so that was cancelled. And then we weren't sure about what was happening for the Olympics. And then she qualified for the Olympics with a 2:28 marathon in the Cheshire Marathon. I think that was in April of 2022. And then she went to the Japan Olympics and running the marathon in Sapporo. However, she dropped out because of the heat and humidity.
Oh, yeah, that was a big problem then.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that was all online coaching, even
Or
for Eva Cook.
everything for Aoife Cook. I mean, I met Aoife a couple of times. So she was out in Kenya for a couple of weeks with me, and I went down a couple of times to court to do workouts with her just to check in. And then sometimes I go to her races and things, but then I do that with a few people. But basically, all the training was delivered online, the same as it is with everybody else. And the same with all the people that have qualified for the US Olympic marathon trials. Everything's been online.
And how does that work, online coaching?
So what happens is currently I use Final Surge. I put the training up. So if somebody contacts me about coaching, what I would do is I have quite an extensive profile questionnaire that covers everything from their personal stuff to medical history, injuries, nutrition, their work, their family, their strength and conditioning, their PBs, their goals, all that sort of stuff. It's extensive. And then so I have a read through that. Then we book in a call. We have a chat about where they're going to head. And then on a weekly basis, I put the training up in Final Surge. They comment on their runs. I reply to the comments on the runs to everybody that I coach. We have a weekly feedback system, a monthly review system, and then we do ongoing calls as well. So, in fact, I actually think it's a far better way of coaching than in person.
Okay, well, that's very different than what most runners think about coaching, probably.
Yeah, I would say so. Apart from those, the ones that are being coached by me online. So,
Like me. Great.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, besides online coaching, you also have a running camp in Kenya. How does that
Yeah.
fit in?
So I first went to Kenya just about probably about 30 years ago on a holiday, and since then I've been going back nearly every year, from for anything from 2 weeks to 6 months. And in 10 specifically, probably about nearly 10 years now. And through the time I've been over there, I've made lots of contacts and things. So I go out every year. I take people that I coach out there, and I also teach people to become running coaches out there too in person. And that can vary between anything between 1 and 3 times a year. but that's something that I'm developing at the moment, so that the people can go with anytime throughout the year now. And I've got people that I employ out in Kenya that, you know, have worked with me for some of them 10 years, actually, some 7, and they look after people whenever they go out there.
Oh, cool. So now it's year-round coaching also in Iten, Kenya.
Yeah, not by me though, but I've got people that go out there that look after people. I've got Kenyan coaches out there and pacers and things that look after people whenever they go over.
Okay. Well, online you're mostly known for helping people to go sub 3 and sub 2.5. But how does that work for recreational runners?
Well, I coach a lot of recreational runners as well, so people who are complete beginners. Um, and this is probably it's much harder to coach a complete beginner than it is to coach an elite athlete or somebody trying to go sub 3, because the biggest challenge with a beginner runner or recreational runner is that they're predominantly going to be hip flexor dominant, and they've got a shuffly stride. And what most coaches would do with these kind of people is to get them to improve, is get them to run more and start giving them intervals and long runs and things. And all that leads to is them getting injured. The first thing you have to do is change their running form, but you have to do it in a very subtle way. It has to be done automatically rather than consciously. And there's certain methods that I use to do that. And I've got examples of people who have gone from 4:15 for the marathon to 2:55 and sub 3 within 10 months in a year or 18 months. But some of those people don't move in that kind of they're kind of the outliers. But most people, say who's a, I don't know, a 4-hour marathon runner, they would normally take 30 to 40 minutes off the marathon in the first year. I go through a system which is foundation, which is where I develop people so they can run for 65 minutes easy on the easy runs, 90 minutes easy on the long run. Then I have a thing called the pre-super base, which you're well familiar with. And then the super base, and then bridge training, and then the marathon specific training, and it kind of works perfectly across a whole year. And one of the things that I advocate is that people should only do 1 marathon a year rather than the 2 that most do. And why people do 2 marathons a year is they're copying elites, and what they don't understand is elites do that for money and sponsorship. And if you're doing 2 marathons a year, it's a lot harder to make the big improvements that people do in the stable. So generally, within the course of a year, somebody like a 4-hour marathon runner would normally be making 20 to 40 minutes improvement. A 3:30 marathon runner would be looking to get under sub 3 or close to sub 3. Somebody who's around the 3-hour mark would be looking to get down to 2:45. Somebody who's at 2:45 is looking to get 2:30. Some at 2:30 to 2:25. Obviously, it narrows down. You know, the farther in you go. But one of the key things is that I don't. I even though I used to run big mileage myself, I'm not an advocate of it for people who are slower than 2:25 for the marathon. So everybody that I coach who's slower than 2:25 run singles. Most people only run 5 times a week as well. Whereas a lot of people are trying to run sub 3. I've seen in certain groups that people are running 7 days a week, doing doubles, doing Norwegian doubles and all of this malarkey. And they generally, in terms of percentages, they make small improvements and quite often get injured. But you don't need to, like, 5 runs a week is probably the maximum for somebody looking to break 3 hours for the marathon. When you're getting down to 2:30, yes, I have a few people that run 6 times a week, but the majority of them run 5 times a week.
Yeah, and with doubles,
And then,
you mean double sessions on one day?
yeah, no, nobody does that apart from my elite runners. Like, I've
Yeah,
got a few elite runners that, you know, I've got somebody who's training for the next Olympics, and he runs 120 miles a week. He does 5 doubles a week and 2 singles. And one of those singles is a big workout on the weekend.
is there a mileage for a sub 3 marathoner? Where you aim
Not
for?
really, no. No, I had somebody qualify for the US Olympic marathon trials running 25 miles a week, a woman, and that was when it was the qualifying time was 2:45. Savannah Berry, she actually finished 10th in the last US Olympic marathon trials as well, but she's doing more mileage than that now. But she was kind of injury prone because she came out of college with a lot of injuries, so we had to manage her training very carefully. But I would say, for most people, the average for breaking 3 would be, again, 5 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week. Although I do have people running less than that who've done it as well.
So chasing mileage isn't the best way to run a PB on a marathon.
Not chasing it, but mileage is important as well, because obviously mileage is one of the key things in terms of developing mitochondria. Mitochondrial biogenesis is which is one of the key things we're after as runners. However, people mistake this, and you don't need it for a sub 3 hour marathon. Where this becomes a lot more important is more in the sub elite and elite area. Then you're talking then that you need to do doubles and the bigger mileage. But most people, the reason why they're not improving or they plateau is they're training in the wrong way. They're doing an interval session on a Tuesday, a tempo session on a Thursday, and a long slow run on the weekend. And there's too much in their week, and then they do a lot of strength and conditioning training as well with weights and things, and they don't know how to lift properly. They get injured. They don't understand that weights is like a workout. So there's too much mess in the weekly build up, and it needs to be clean and simple. And the way we do it is one midweek workout. The long run has work in it, and that's it. Everything else is about recovery, unless somebody's doing hill blasts and strides.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned the whole system in short a few minutes back. Let's go through the system from a beginner to the marathon specific training. So the foundation stage, what's the foundation stage?
Okay, this is somebody who might be running 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And the first thing we do with them is get them so that they can go from 35 minutes easy 3 times a week up to 65 minutes easy, and they would progress maybe 5 or 10 minutes each week, depending on their injury history, their age, and their background, and what time they have available, family circumstances, work, and things like that. And one of the runs develops, the fourth run develops into a 90-minute run. So once somebody's able to do 3 times 65 easy and 90 minutes easy, they would be finishing the foundation stage. And the reason why this is important is because it's not just about to get them the experience of running and learn to running by feel and understand their body. It's to develop the musculoskeletal system to prepare for the next stage. And this is the area where many people get injured who are in the, like beginner runners. They tend to get medial tibial stress syndrome or shin splints because they run too fast, or they run too far, or they have the wrong shoes and things like that. So this is like a learning process for them before we introduce them to, I suppose, the pre-super base.
Yeah, too much too soon is a common problem.
Yeah,
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 exactly.
100%.
And we're talking about 4 times a week of running.
Yeah, that would generally be somebody on the foundation stage, or 3 times a week. If somebody's running 3 times a week, I generally give them a little nudge and try to encourage them to run 4, because there's an advantage to that over 3. If you're running 3 times a week, it's difficult to improve, because unless you're doing cross training, like cycling and swimming and
Yeah,
things
of
like that on
course.
the side. But generally, if they've only got you're more maintaining fitness, and it's difficult to press on because the injury risk increases, because you need to get the musculoskeletal system, excuse me, developed.
Exactly. Okay, so that's the foundation. We're getting somewhere to 3 times 65, one 90-minute long run, and then we're ready to go to the pre-super base. What's a pre-super base and why did you make it?
Yeah, so just to note there, with the long run, it's just 90 minutes easy. There's no tempo in it. It doesn't go
No.
any longer than that. It just keeps there, so so that their body gets used to that time and distance. So the pre-super base, this is probably one of the most important things for runners that are, say for a marathon, if they're 3:45 and slower, because in fact probably 3:30 and slower, because they're going to be hip flexor dominant. And the idea here is to change them from being hip flexor dominant to glute dominant. Now, a lot of coaches, what they'll do is they'll give them strength and conditioning if they're aware of this, and a lot of coaches aren't, they'll start trying to get their glutes working through strength and conditioning, but it doesn't work that way. It needs to be, and I hate the word functional, but it needs to be functional and done through a running way. So what we do here is, if you've got somebody who's running, say they come out of the foundation phase, they're running 4 times a week, the 365s and a 90, they'll keep 165 session in. They'll do a session of strides, which I'll come back to in a minute. They'll do heel blasts, and they'll do the 90-minute run. Then it stays at 90 minutes again, just so that the body gets used to over the weeks coping with that time and duration. So the hill blasts, they're not hill repeats as they're traditionally known. They're 8-second hill blasts. Now, if somebody's over 30, or sorry, over 35, it's done on a shallow hill, not in the traditional way with elite runners and elite sports people in pre-season training, where it'll be a steep hill and they sprint up it. With this, it's a shallow hill of about 5 degrees, 5%, 5 degrees. I still haven't worked out. I looked it up the other day. I can't remember. But we do them in a certain way. So they'll do a warm up. They'll do 3 drills. that break the stride down, and basically part of the process of rewiring the central nervous system, getting the brain talking to the butt or the glutes so that the glutes are engaged in the activity that they're about to do. And we have a mantra when they run up the hill. So they'll do their warm up, do their drills. They've got the hill and they run up it. And the mantra is tall, relax, piston, pop, pop, pop. So what that means is you've got a hill. It's not too steep. It's normally when we run up a hill, we lean into a hill. But with this, the person runs up the hill tall. Okay. And straight away that engages the glutes more. So they'll notice that straight away. If they're leaning into the hill, the hip flexors will be working more and they'll be shuffling up the hill. But if they run tall, they'll feel the glutes being engaged more. And then the relaxed part is because they're going to be running up the hill fast, but they don't want to be all tense. They want to be nice and relaxed and breathing. And one of the common things that I see is people don't breathe whenever they do the 8-second hill blast. And then the piston part is that it's probably the single most important part, and it's what you do with your arms. So you have your fist lightly clenched, your thumb on top, not as if you're about to punch somebody, but nice and lightly clenched. And what most people recognize as sprinters, they'll see that they pump their fists up to about shoulder height. Okay, but that's not the important part. It's what happens behind, because what happens behind affects the stride and engages the glutes a lot more. So as you come back, you brush across the top of your hip, you drive your elbow up to as close to shoulder height you can without causing the pelvis to rotate, and then you drive through. And that action there, as you drive back, even if you're sitting in a chair, and if you do this action and pull your fist across the top of your hip and pull back, you'll feel your glutes suddenly just firing up and becoming more engaged just sitting there. So when you're running, this is really important, because what it does autonomously, which means automatically, your stride will lengthen, your glutes will be more engaged, and you'll get more power. So, and that's the key thing that's kind of happening there. And then the final part of the mantra, pop, pop, pop. When we run up a hill, we're in the plant phase, which means your foot's on the ground longer. So you imagine hot coals. So you're popping off the ground as well. Now, when you put all of this together, it feels really awkward. It feels a bit strange. It feels like you're riding a bicycle up the hill. And that's a sensation that you want, because that means you're getting the hip extension, which is the key driver of this session. And then the heels are coming up underneath the butt rather than shuffling up the stride, up the hill. And the reason why the hills are 8 seconds is because of the creatine phosphagen system that we use in their CP. Everybody has about 8 to 12 seconds of that in their body. So we use that because it's explosive. It's like a one lift max. Okay. So once you've used that, it takes 2 minutes 30 for the body to replenish it. So we don't jog back down the hill. We stop and we walk around at the bottom until the 230 is up, and then we go again. And the best way to sort of for people to envisage this, if they've ever seen sprinters training at a track, they'll see them sprinting flat out for 50 meters with their top off in the sunshine, showing their pecs, and then they walk around the track for 350 meters. And what they're doing is, it's not that they're lazy, they're waiting for the CP energy system to replenish so they can go again and do another effort. Now, people might say, what's the relevance of 8 seconds to a marathon? It's massively important, because this is the single best way to improve your running economy. And the marathon's mainly about running economy. It's one of the major components of it. It improves running efficiency, running economy, the power in your stride, the length in your stride as well. And this works, but most people don't do it because most coaches don't know about it. And most athletes don't want to do it because they don't see it's worthwhile, apart from the people in Stazza's stable who do it and see the benefits of it. And that's one of the key reasons how you get a 4-hour runner, marathon runner, to go sub-3 quite quickly. But you have to complement that with, like, what I would call, I suppose, like a mini workout. So what we do is the other session, the workout session, is we start off, and I actually developed this from a guy called John Kellogg. He calls it aerobic strides, but aerobic strides is a misnomer, because when we run, we're using all 3 energy systems, but in different proportions. So with this, what you do is you do your warm up, and then you come to a lamppost and you would run for 20 seconds at roughly about 5K effort. Stop, turn around and jog back. You'd repeat that 5 times, then jog for 3 minutes, and then do another set of 5 reps, and then jog for 3 minutes, and then another set of 5 reps. Now that's a really easy session. It's just 3 sets of 5 times 20 seconds. It's not a lot at 5K effort. Then what we do in the next week, we progress that. Everything that we do is done in a progressive, structured way as well, which is very, very important. So next week, what we do is we take those 20-second strides and we make them into 30, and then the next week into 40. So then in week 4, you repeat the 3 sets of 5 times 40, jog for 3 minutes whenever you finish. And then what we do is we do a 2-minute add-on at 5K effort. And then the next week, that 2 minutes becomes 3 minutes, and then next week, then 4 minutes, and then 5 minutes. So you end up doing 3 sets of 5 times 40 seconds plus a 5-minute add-on. Whereas where we started was with 1 set of 5 times 20 seconds. Now, what happens with this is you'll probably find is that when they do the 5-minute add-on, it will be quicker than the original session of 3 sets of 5 times 20 seconds. And the reason for that is because of the hill blasts. Because as you do the hill blasts and the strides, they work synergistically. The technique that you're learning from the hill blast and the rewiring the central nervous system transfers across into the strides, and their running economy improves as they go along. And then that actually then transfers into their easy running as well. So what they find is in this kind of 7-week technical block that they're running faster in their easy runs and the heart rate's lower. So that's and once they've done this, now is the time that they're ready to start to do some work. And that's where we move them onto the super base.
Yeah, and now their body is also ready to do the work. It is also accustomed now to a bit more work.
100%, yeah. So like whenever they do that 3 sets of 5 times 40, the 2, 3, 4, 5-minute add-ons, that feels more like a traditional workout when you get to the 3-minute add-on, the 4-minute add-on, the 5-minute add-on. In fact, the 4-minute add-on and the 5-minute add-on are quite tough sessions. They're pretty similar to like a traditional workout.
Yeah, exactly. So now someone is ready to move into the super base. How does the super base work, and what are the sessions?
Okay, right. That could take a long time to explain, but the super base,
Overview.
I design. I used to use a lot of the sessions from the super base for over the years, but then during COVID, when people couldn't race, I thought, aha, this is perfect. Now I can get people training properly in the right way without the people racing every weekend and things like this. So I developed the super base, and the idea behind the super base was to develop the musculoskeletal system so it could cope with the marathon training and the harder training after the super base. But the super base in and of itself is a form of developing an aerobic capacity as well. So if we got a runner running 4 times a week or 5 times a week, they'll do 2 easy runs of 65 minutes or 3 easy runs of 65 minutes, or 1 run of 65 minutes and 1 session of hill blast if we carry on with them, or 2 easy runs and 1 session of hill blast. But the important part are the 2 workouts. So the midweek workout, we started off with a 20-minute warm-up, a 20-minute tempo, and a 20-minute cool down. Now, what I mean about a 20-minute tempo is basically the effort that you could hold on the day, in the conditions, on the course, in the weather, and how you're feeling for 1 hour. Now, people will recognize that as threshold, which it is, but that's not the reason why we do it, because this is about developing the musculoskeletal system through doing workouts as well. So we start there. Now, let's say somebody does that session at, say, 5 minutes per kilometer, for example, the 20-minute tempo, and they say to themselves afterwards, yeah, that was about right. Or they might have done it at 4:55 and say, no, that was wrong. I think I could have held about 5 minutes, today. And this is important because what happens then on the other workout, the long run, we do 30 minutes easy, and then we do a 40-minute tempo and 30 minutes easy. The 40-minute tempo that we do is 12 seconds per kilometer slower than the 20-minute tempo. So if we work that out in miles as well, that would be 20 seconds per mile slower than the midweek tempo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what happens here, if we stick with the long run, the way this progresses, it works in 3 weekly cycles. So you would do, in this example, you would do a 40-minute tempo at 5:12. Then in week 2, you do a 50-minute tempo at 5:12. Week 3, a 60-minute tempo at 5:12. Then you come back round to the 40 minutes. And now what you do with the 40 minutes is you go 3 seconds per kilometer quickly. So you go 40, 50, 60 at 5:9. And then the next time you come around the cycle, it'll be 5:6, then 5:3, then 5. And what invariably happens is that by the time people finish the super base, their 60-minute tempo, the last one that they do, is quicker than their midweek original 20-minute tempo. And it does have that big of an effect. People improve by 30, 40 seconds per kilometer through this kind of 14-week block. And the reason why you improve with the 40, 50, 60s, which I call endurance spine runs, because they're the spine of everything we do, and they develop the endurance. And they're also preparing the musculoskeletal system for half marathon and marathon training as well. And and racing. So what happens with the midweek workout, where we started off with a 20-minute tempo at 5-minute pace, the next week, as I said, everything progresses in a structured way. So with the 40, 50, 60, you see the progression because we're extending them out. Then we come round, they're still progressing because we're getting quicker and extending. With the midweek, we start off with the 20-minute tempo at 5 minutes per kilometer. And then in week 2, so it's a 20-minute warm up and a 20-minute cool down for the midweek. For the weekend with the endurance line, it's 30 minutes easy and 30 minutes easy cool down as well. So the midweek session, the first week 1 is 20-minute tempo at say 5-minute pace per kilometer. Week 2, we do a 20-minute tempo at 5, then 3 minutes easy. Then we do 10 minutes at 5-minute effort. Sorry, at 5 minutes per kilometer. So that's the progression, the 10 minutes. Then in week 2, we develop that 10-minute part. So it becomes 15. And then the next week it becomes 20. So where we started off at 1 times 20 minutes at 5 minutes per kilometer, we're now doing 2 times 20 minutes at 5 minutes per kilometer. And at that point there, people start to notice a shift in their fitness. Their aerobic fitness starts to improve and they feel a lot stronger. They don't feel fast, but they feel stronger. Okay. So now what we're going to do, the musculoskeletal system's ready to go a bit quicker safely. So we do the following week, in week 5, we do a 20-minute tempo at 5-minute pace. Then we do 3 minutes easy. And then we do 4 times 5 minutes at 6 seconds per kilometer quicker, which would be 4:54. And the recovery in between those 5 minutes is 3 minutes easy. Okay. Then the next week we take out the 20-minute tempo and it now becomes 8 times 4:54 with a 3-minute recovery. So we start off with a 20-minute tempo at 5 minutes, a 20-minute tempo at 5 minutes per kilometer. We're now doing 8 times 5 minutes at 4 minutes 54 per kilometer. And when we get to there, we're on what I call the precipice of the V-shaped valley of death, because we're about to come down and get quicker. But now the musculoskeletal system's ready to get down and come quicker in this area. So we're here with 8 times 5 minutes at 3:54. Sorry, at 4:54 off a 3-minute recovery. And next week we do 10 times 4 minutes, but we don't increase by 6 seconds. We only increase by 3 seconds. So we're now doing 10 times 4 minutes at 4:51 off a 3-minute easy recovery. The recoveries are generous, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the next week we drop down to 10 times 3 minutes at 4:48. Then the next week 15 times 2 at 4:45. Then the next week 20 times 1 minute at 4:42. Now, when you do the 2 minutes, the recovery is 2 minutes, and when you do the 1 minute, the recovery is 1 minute. Then what we do is we come back up the V-shaped valley and we do the 15 times 2, 10 times 3, 10 times 4, 8 times 5. But what you'll find is you don't slow down as you come back up the way that you sped up coming down and into the 20 times 1 minute. Now, as you're coming down into those 20 times 1 minute, the guideline is to improve the pace by 3 seconds per kilometer each week. But invariably, what happens with most people, especially people that are coming from a previous sporting background, is that they'll accelerate through that. And that's fine. That's okay if they do. But what's important is with the endurance spine runs that they don't. You have to keep them on that 40, 50, 60 and keep it controlled. Otherwise, they'll end up racing the endurance spine runs and getting injured. So they come down to the 20 times 1. As they come back up, they do the 15 times 2, the 20 times 1. When they come to do the 15 times 2, 2 weeks later, it'll be roughly about the same, maybe a little bit quicker. Okay. But then when they do the 10 times 3, which is a minute longer rep, and it's the same volume in terms of 30 minutes worth of work, it will be at the same pace as the 15 times 2 and faster when they do the 10 times 3 coming down. Then when they do the 10 times 4, because the rep's 1 minute longer and the volume of the session is 10 minutes more, they'll probably slow down a little bit, 1 or 2 seconds, okay? But it'll still be considerably faster when they did the 10 times 4 coming down. And then the final midweek session in the super base is 8 times 5 minutes, which was at the beginning of the precipice of the V-shaped valley of death. And when they do that, it'll probably be exactly the same pace, if not even a little bit quicker than the 10 times 4. Because all the way behind it, you've got the 40, 50, 60s developing the musculoskeletal system and the endurance side of things as well. When they finish the super base, they're in fantastic shape, as you can imagine, because of how much they've improved across, we're talking about people improving, on a 40, 50, 60-minute tempo by 30 seconds per kilometer over 14 weeks. And that happens about 95% of the time. Now, it doesn't happen with everybody. Some people, they might get a niggle or they might get sick and things like that, or they might have weather conditions that they have to contend with. And it varies, but generally 95% of the time, that's what happens. When they come out of that, and I didn't design it this way, but they're in great shape to race a half marathon or a 10K. For example, 2 weeks ago, I had a guy, he started with me 5 months ago. his PB for a half marathon was 1:39, and he was only running 2 times 20 minutes and 1 times 25 minutes. He'd been injured for months. And then 2 weekends ago, he did a half marathon. He ran 1:26, which is a 13-minute PB after 5 months. And
That's
that's
incredible.
okay. Not everybody jumps that much, but most people who are, say, around 140 for a half marathon will probably get close to, if not breaking, 130. If somebody's running at 130, they'll probably break 125. If somebody's at 125, they'll probably get around 120. If they're at 120, they'll be about 117, and so on and so forth. This works for beginners through elites as well. Elite runners can do this well, and it works equally well.
Okay. Dus now they're having a very solid base in their half marathon shape. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've learned a lot about how to run by feel and understand their body. We don't use heart rate, zone training. We don't use stride and power and all of this malarkey. So it's about teaching the person to listen to their body and run by feel. So one of the things that I say like on the endurance spine runs, the 40, 50, 60s, yes, you should come round or be able to run at the same pace. But of course, if you run on a different course, if it's windy, if it's hot and humid and things like that, or you're tired, you haven't slept much, or your nutrition's been out the window and things as well like that, or you've got a lot of stress at work, that won't happen in that kind of mechanically engineered way, the way that the architecture is built for it. So what I also say to people is, with the endurance spine runs, it should be the pace that you can hold on the day, in the conditions, on the course for roughly about 90 minutes. So that's a good guideline. So if you finish the 40, you say, yeah, I could have kept going for another 50 minutes. If you finish the 50, I could have kept going for another 40. If you do the 60, so that should say, I could do another 30. And that's important, because if people do it a lot quicker than that, they're going to get injured and get burnt out and get stale. But I know invariably people are going to do it faster than the 90 minutes. But if I said, do it for the pace you could do for 80, they do it at the pace that they could do for 70. So generally anything around 80 to 90 minutes. So when you finish a 60-minute tempo, you feel like you could have kept going on that day in those conditions on that course for another 10 minutes, 20 minutes or so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Well, what's left is bridge training and marathon training, but you have to go in a few minutes, so we'll keep that for a part 2.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, 100%, Juice. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I didn't give you a chance to talk much. I'll have you on my podcast and I'll give you a chance to talk.
You're a great talker. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Juice. Thanks very much for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I'll put your links in the bio in the description so people can find you. Thank you very much for your time, John.
Make sure they they check out the YouTube channel, because they'll enjoy that. It's not the standard YouTube channel. It's about running, about my journey, as well as a 61-year-old trying to break 2:45 for the marathon, my first ever marathon, smoking 30 cigarettes a day, drinking, overweight and stuff like that. But it's good fun as well. And there's a lot of training chat in it. But it's not about VO2 max, Norwegian doubles, threshold and zones and things like that. It's a bit of fun. And all this, what I'm talking about now, is a system. I'm starting off walking at the moment, and I'm going to be going through this whole system of foundation, super base, bridge and marathon training. And hopefully in Seville, I think, or probably Seville, at the age of 63, I'm looking to publicly go sub 2:45, but to go a lot faster privately.
Well, enjoy your journey.
Good stuff. All right.
Thank you very
Juice.
much.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye, John.
Cheers. Bye.